All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. If folks do join us a couple minutes late, that is certainly okay. So I would just like to welcome all of you and thank you for choosing to spend an hour of your afternoon participating in today's session, supporting students through political unrest. Today, we would like to provide a space for all of you to talk about what you're experiencing as a result of the election, and we want to talk about what you're seeing on campus. We'll check in with you to see how you're feeling and doing. We've also created a safe space for open dialogue, regardless of your personal political affiliation and stance on any issue. Today's session will allow you to step away with some takeaways of how you can support students through this time. First, I would like to get started by doing some introductions. My name is Hannah Stoneburner. I am a Regional Director of Program Development with the National Society of Leadership and Success. I do have a higher ed background. I spent the past 10 years of my career working on various college campuses. I joined the NSLS team about 1 year ago, and I'm coming to you today from my home in northwestern Minnesota. Today, I'll be serving as the session's host. I am also joined by my colleague, Dan Felco, who is helping out with the tech platform and helping me manage Zoom. So thank you, Dan, for all of your help on that. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's facilitator, Dr. Kozhi Sidney Makai. Dr. Kozhi is a dynamic, engaging, wildly personable individual, and his passion is undeniably contagious. Working on today's session has been a true delight. As a behavioral scientist and founder of Kozhi Makai Worldwide, a strengths-based idea studio focused on aligning professionals with their personal goals to help them generate sustainable performance, Kozhi's mission is to bring you from potential to performance. His attitude and strong belief that we can all learn from one another made him a perfect choice for today's facilitator of this important dialogue. Dr. Kozhi, thank you so much for being with us today, and I'd like to turn it over to you if you have anything else you'd like to add.
Well, thank you very much, Hannah. Welcome, everyone. We are going to be very respectful of your time, but we're going to have fun in the middle of something that can be a little bit challenging and difficult for us. I would say the only thing I would add is really thinking about two words. I want you to consider these two words: dialogue or debate. I think it's really important for us to think as we spend this hour together. All the spaces that we enter, obviously today's spaces that we'll have as you go off to breakout rooms to discuss, but also post-election, we'll have to make the very hard decision of entering every conversation, whether it's political or not, from the attitude of debate or the attitude of dialogue. And the main difference between those two is, in a debate, somebody wins, somebody loses. Now, truthfully, in a debate, especially when it comes to politics within family, among friends, etc., there are no winners. And so you will start to see as we talk about this that eventually there are no winners. You may win on a position, but if you've lost family members, what's the gain? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Our goal today is to create a space for us to have dialogue. Dialogue does not require you to agree with me. Dialogue does not even require you to believe in what I just said. Dialogue is you recognizing my humanity and allowing me a space to share my thoughts, good, bad, or indifferent. And I get to do the same with you. Now, we may end up moving each other in one direction or another, but honestly, besides that, it's really about connecting with each other. The only other thought that I would like to add is for you to take this here with you, right? We essentially teach what we know, but we are going to reproduce who we are. So every space that you enter, ask yourself, which version of you do you want to reproduce in others? Do you want to reproduce the version that says dialogue is a good thing, let's have dialogue, or one that says this is a debate that I have to win at any cost? And That's going to make all the difference, because in the middle of all of this, we have to have an interesting but also honest conversation with ourselves so that we can have interesting and great conversations with others as well.
Great, thank you. Before we really dive in, we would like to ask if you're comfortable to please turn on your camera. We just would like to see your faces so we can put a name to that voice. And then we would also like, if you are uncomfortable with having that video on, totally okay. You can feel free to use that chat feature and speak up when we're having the small and large group dialogues. As Dr. Kozhi said, it's our goal to make sure that everyone has a voice and feels like they can be comfortable and they can be heard in today's session. It's also important that we take a moment to set up some ground rules. We are not here to argue sides. We're here to support one another. It may be a difficult topic to talk about, but we want to make sure that all voices are being heard and everyone feels respected. This is going to be an open discussion, a dialogue with colleagues of folks working in higher ed dedicated to supporting today's college student. We're not here to debate, but we are here to be open with how we're feeling to create that meaningful dialogue. So now I will turn it over to Dr. Kozhi for some remarks to set the tone for today's session.
I like the ground rules, and think of the ground rules as just bumpers when you're bowling. We just want to get you all the way down so that you can go hit the pins. And the best way for us to do that is to be very clear that this isn't a right, wrong, this isn't a good, bad, this is a just is. And because it just is, we're all feeling a lot today. I can tell you from my earlier conversation this morning with a different group that there's a sense of anxiety. Now, that anxiety may be politically motivated in the sense of I wouldn't want my guy to win, or I want this thing to happen. But part of it is not knowing, and we struggle with not knowing. I want you to know that it's absolutely okay for you to not know. In fact, most days there's a lot that we, just don't know. And we need to get really comfortable with the ambiguity of not knowing. We put way too much pressure on ourselves when we start to feel as if we need to know everything. So please don't enter this space or any other space going forward feeling as if you have to know everything. It's okay to enter a space not knowing what's going on, but just connecting with people, finding out what other people are thinking, and seeing how you can find those touch points that matter the most. Because no matter who wins, we have to put our country back together. And there's only one group that can put the country back together, and that's you and me. Our politicians, that's not the game they play. They are playing a zero-sum game, win or lose. You and I have to live with our neighbors. We have to drive on the highways alongside our neighbors and our community. And so our communities need to be strong. Our communities need to be vibrant. And only you and I can create that space for that to happen. So that's probably all I would add when it comes to our ground rules. Let's have a little bit of fun. I don't have hair, but those of you that do, let your hair down and let's relax a little bit and just enjoy for the next few moments, connecting with other people and talking about the things about where we are in terms of feelings. Now, I'm a psychologist, so I like talking about feelings. So it's okay for us to talk about how we feel. That's a good place for us to have that cathartic release.
So to start some dialogue here, Dr. Kozhi, I want to circle back on one of the points you made earlier about dialogue or debate. Question I have for you is, how can you set someone up on the other side when you might be going in with the intent to have that dialogue, but they're coming in with that mentality that they're ready to debate?
One of the things that's really important in a setting such as that one is being honest. Obviously being honest with ourselves, but also being honest with the other person, and say, unfortunately, my sense in this conversation is this is more of a debate than a dialogue. I want you to know that I will not be debating you. And it's interesting when one of us stays calm, especially the one person that we can control, which is me. When I stay calm in that situation, I can be honest and say, I really don't want to debate you. Not because debate isn't fun, because there are moments where debate is fun, but this relationship matters more to me than simply winning or losing a debate. I want to connect on an open level. And you can't connect on an open level without dialogue, which is what I want to do. So I want to hear what your position is. I also want to learn why your position is that way. Zero judgment. I just want to hear it. And maybe you will allow me to do the same thing. Now, if the person isn't willing to do you the same courtesy, that's okay. It's absolutely okay for us to have the other person share their perspective with us, and we focus on what we can control. And so I can't control whether the other person is going to be willing to debate or willing to have dialogue with me. But my behavior and my example sets the tone for everything, because they might get really excited and animated. I want to understand where that passion comes from. And it has to be genuine, obviously. You're entering this space genuinely wanting to understand. And eventually a person will get that. So for those of you that might be worried that you will enter this space and the person will essentially take advantage of you, please remember that you're not entering this dialogue and it's the last dialogue or conversation you're ever going to have with that person or any person ever again. We have to think of this as an ongoing process of personal and also community development. That means today we have the conversation and they give me their points, they give me their perspective, and all I do is inquire more and more to get deeper and deeper to understand their perspective. If they never say to me, now tell me about your position, I can't take that personally. I just have to say we had a good conversation today, because a conversation doesn't require both people to have said something. You have to have a listener and you have to have a speaker. And the one person that controls everything in my mind is the listener. So when we listen with intent, when we listen with compassion, when we listen with grace, it allows the other person to truly share who they are. And at the very least, giving them that option really builds and nurtures a relationship, even if this is the very first time that you're meeting someone. So please remember that listening is a form of spiritual hospitality. We invite somebody else into our very being. And that's the best gift we can give to somebody in the middle of a dialogue.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Kozhi, for that perspective. If you could please walk us through what is taking place in our current climate right now, that'd be great.
You know, interestingly, we're seeing, I guess I'll be blunt, right? And those of you that know me know I'm pretty straightforward and I'm blunt. I think in many ways we're struggling with perspective. There are multiple layers of things going on at the same time, and it's very hard for us to reconcile all of them. Our brains, the human brain is essentially made to be lazy. That's the simplest way I can explain it. The human brain is made to be lazy because it does everything that it can to conserve calories. The human brain is your weird, I'll use the word weird, but I don't mean it negatively, but your weird relative that you have at Thanksgiving that acts really odd sometimes, or they hoard things because they think that they won't be enough. That's how our brain works. Our brain is always on the defense, thinking that it won't get fed. So it's trying to not use as many calories. So wherever it can fill in the gaps and fill in the blanks without doing the work, it will do that, which is where we get our stereotyping. So there are moments where stereotyping makes sense, right? Even when we don't fill in all the blanks, right? We know essentially what a cup looks like. It's not like our eyes are looking at that and filling in all the blanks. And so our brain really struggles with that. The one thing that I'm finding more and more is people forget that we have blind spots. And here's something that we all need to know. Every single human being, every eye, even for those of you who wear glasses, right? Whether an eye is 20/20 or not, all our eyes have an area in them or areas in them called scotoma. And scotoma are basically places where light enters and disappears or dies. And those we call, in simple parlance, blind spots. Every single one of us has blind spots. It's a part of nature, right? Our natural eyes have it. That means we have blind spots in our perspectives. We have blind spots in our viewpoints. We naturally have those. So we need others to come in and shed the light. We would be foolhardy if we assumed that other people shedding light, however they shed their light, and it falling on us and just simply dying is a good thing. So the challenge right now is that we are refusing to embrace the fact that we don't have it together. We don't have all the answers. And depending on our personality type, that can be a huge struggle because, well, we want to be right. But as I've always said, I don't care about being right. And you can quote me on that. I don't care about being right. I care about being righteous, because the difference between right and righteous is that for me to be right, somebody else has to be wrong. And I have yet to meet somebody who's excited about being wrong. Nobody gets excited about being wrong. So it naturally puts people on the defensive. But when we look at the perspective of righteousness, it basically says that I am going to do the right thing. And most of the time, when you're doing the right thing, it's not going to feel great for you because you will feel as if you're being robbed. But that's the joy of being able to do that, is I'm going to do the right thing, which means in this moment, this is probably not the moment I should say something. Maybe this is not the moment where I should be quiet. This is when maybe I will speak, even if it's the most uncomfortable thing for me to do or the most unnatural thing for me to do. So we have to be really in tune with where we are emotionally, where we are internally. And unfortunately, right now, depending on where you're getting your content, it can be a free fall. There is no righteousness. Everybody feels that they're right. So they're just throwing as much as they can and seeing what sticks. And unfortunately, that's the world what we're in right now, is that there's a sense of we're just going to say whatever comes to mind. Forget the consequences. We'll just say whatever. We'll just say whatever. And unfortunately, it's damaging relationships, especially for small knit communities, including families.
Yeah, those are some great points. I think that, it's definitely what's taking place, people having a lot of feelings tied up into what's happened, over the past 4 years and building up to the election. So what we're going to do now is we're going to give you all an opportunity to practice this dialogue. So Dr. Kozhi is going to pose 3 questions. He's got some content that goes along with those questions, and we'll facilitate that dialogue in those small groups. So the first question that we're going to ask the group here is what you're seeing happen on your campus. And I'll kick it back over to you, Dr. Kozhi.
Thank you, Hannah. What we want to do is to have you go into groups, which will throw you randomly into groups. So try to be nice to each other and say hello to each other. And if you can turn your cameras on, feel free to do that. Otherwise, you'll be able to chat within each of those breakout rooms. But we just want you to share from a very receiver's perspective. What are you seeing happen on your campus? Now, obviously, some of you have virtual things going on, but just what are you hearing? What are you seeing? What is the sense that you're getting that's happening on your campus? And then just talk about it with each other, right? You don't have to go at it from one perspective or another. We'll come to that when we get to the next questions. But at this point, we just want you to have that dialogue over about 7 minutes. You talk to each other and just share, this is what I'm seeing on my campus. This is what I'm seeing on my campus. And you don't have to judge it being good, bad, right, or indifferent. Just share with everyone what you're seeing on your campus. And then when you come back to the large group, we'll debrief and see what came out of each of those groups.
All right, it looks like everyone is back from their breakout room. So hopefully you had some great conversations. And now I will turn it over to Dr. Kozhi. In this section here, we're going to ask that you unmute yourself. You all should have that ability to do so. So if you would like to share what was discussed and what you're seeing with your group, or what you're seeing on your campus, please feel free to share that with the large group. Certainly, if you're more comfortable entering things into that chat function, you're welcome to do that as well. Dr. Kozhi?
Thank you, Hannah. We are monitoring the chat section, so if there's anything that you would like to add there, please feel free. We'll take a little bit of time as we debrief. And this debrief is going to be a little bit unorthodox, right? Because we have a lot of people. We won't be able to get through everything, but it would be nice to just get a sense of all of that. And we know that the amount of time that we gave you was certainly not enough to get through everyone, because there's quite a lot to say, right? But we'll try to be as quick as you can. And so I will read a few of the comments that are coming in, and then we can kind of play around with what we're hearing. So lots of uncertainty, scared students, they're tired, which is very, very true. Right now, I'll give you an example. Studies have shown both mostly in Europe, but I think they're starting to do some of those studies here in the US. The number one challenge in Europe right now when it comes to COVID is fatigue, right? There's just a lot of it right now. There's just COVID fatigue. People are just tired. And unfortunately, when people are tired, that's when their will is lowest. And just to combat that, and I know we're going to have a little bit of time to talk about some practical tools, but one of the things that I like to tell people is each of us needs to know essentially where we are in terms of emotionally in order for us to handle it. And the acronym is HALT, HALT. So for most people, when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, we often don't make the best decisions, which is why we need to essentially halt. And so for our students, for ourselves, when we start to feel that we're getting that burnout, that's the time we're most vulnerable. And unfortunately, we're vulnerable not in the positive way, but we're vulnerable in the negative way. So Zoomophobia, all right, stressed out, overwhelmed, anxious, high levels of fatigue, increased anxiety. And I see a question there that we will tackle pretty soon. Another one came in that says needing space to just be. Those are some of the things that are going on. Student activist groups coordinating a protest in downtown Boston tonight. COVID battle fatigue, there it is. We are currently predominantly remote learning. Students in the health sciences areas are on campus for lab. This is for that small grouping of students that has fostered a greater sense of community, and they have banded closer together. That's good. It's good. Keep them coming, and we'll open it up now to anyone that would like to share on camera and share some of the things that came out of your group.
It always just takes one person to be the first one. So I hear someone unmuting themselves. Please feel free to share.
Yeah, I was going to say we had great conversation, and I didn't actually get to hear the last part because we came back, but I heard someone mention about racial tension. I don't know if they want to expand on that, but I think about just where we're positioned. I'm positioned in the South. I'm in Texas. And then, so we know we need to have conversations about race, but our students are tired with everything else. And so it's very, I find myself, because I work in the social justice sphere, struggling to have conversations about race, given that they already have so much other things on their mind. But also understand that's a true fear for some of our students as well. And they're thinking about their communities, they're thinking about their place in society. They're thinking about how can I be a part of activism work and stay safe? How can we do community service? How can we celebrate MLK week and stay safe if it's all about service? And so those are some of the things that I am noticing around campus here, and just the ways in which I can show up to support students. I need more time. I find myself not wanting to give. You can't give from an empty vessel, but it's also, it's a really hard balancing act when I feel as if our students really need us to show up, be present, but it's so much going on.
That's good. Thank you
And
so much for sharing.
Adrena, that was me. That was, this is Jolanda. I was in the middle of speaking about race at our institution when we were removed from our groups. I was also just agreeing with Elizabeth, who was in our group. I'm at a community college. I'm at Baton Rouge Community College in Louisiana. And, of course, our demographic, non-traditional students, we are a predominantly Black community college. And so many people are unaware of that. And then when they step on campus, they see, more Black students than any other demographic. And then, the conversation about race, because most of the faculty don't look like our students. And so, having our students being able to have that conversation around race has been a challenge. We are also virtual due to COVID. And then, of course, our students are dealing with a lot on their plates. They're juggling so many other responsibilities because we are a community college. We don't have a housing component, so everyone is a commuter student. So there are parents, they are, caregivers, they are full-time employees, all types of other roles that may have to be prioritized, and academics are not necessarily the priority when you have all these other things that are competing.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's going to be one of the things we'll be looking at, right? Is the dynamics are different, obviously depending on where you are in the country, but also what type of campus that you're on. My academic career began on a community college campus, and so community is very different on a community college campus, which is funny because there's community in the name, right? It's just it's a different version of community, except for the folks that you perhaps get to take classes together. At least when I was in school, that's what we did. Now, the only students that will do things like that are usually the health sciences, the nursing students would take classes together. The folks who are going in for X-ray technology, they're all a band together. So you get to create that. And so those are some of the things I want us to start thinking about today. And I truly want us to think outside the box. Obviously, it's way out of the purview of our talk today, but that could be a good place for us to start thinking, how can I support my students who are completely out of the norm? They're not living on campus, their moms, their dads, their uncles, their aunts, they're all these different roles that they're playing day to day. Perhaps they live somewhere close enough. Obviously, if they're going to a community college, for the most part, they're within our community sphere. How can we support them? And in thinking about that, I also want you to think about how you can support each other as higher education professionals. The reason we put this together to start with you is we want to equip you as best as we can so that you can do the same for your students. And perhaps it's in small groups such as what we're doing together right now, 60 people, 100 people. You work with as many folks as you can, and you provide an environment for folks to, as some of the comments said, to just be. No judgment, no anything. I'm just going to be. And if you've noticed in our personal relationships, we're the same. I have a very basic rule. I do not go out and spend time with people that bring drama. I have zero interest in drama. I have zero interest in things being complicated. Life is complicated as it is. I think things should be simpler. And unfortunately, in education, there's an idea that the more complex you are in your explanation of things, the more educated you are. I completely disagree. I think the most educated and the person that knows the most has the ability to simplify, because life itself is already complex. So how do we bring simplification? Obviously, there's nuances. I mean, you can't simplify race. You can't simplify any of the issues that we're dealing with. But what we can simplify is our reaction. We can simplify the conversation. We can say this problem is huge and bigger than us, but it's not too big for you and me right now. Whether you and me is me and the 65 of us on the call, or me and one other person, that we can simplify. And I like that. Tasha says, untangle the tangles. Absolutely. That's what we need to do. And it takes work though, right? It takes work to untangle something that's gotten tangled. It really, really does. But it's worthy time. And that's what we want you to get today, that the things that you're seeing on your campuses, fortunately, maybe you're seeing now, especially with everything that's being shared in the chat, that there's a lot of commonality on our campuses, right? Even if there's some of us are community college, some of us are different locations. Ultimately, our students are struggling. And they were struggling before any of this stuff happened, because college is not easy, right? Transitioning from college, right? Imagine being held, your hand being held all the way through 12th grade, and then you're dumped somewhere and everyone says, well, you've got to figure this out on your own now. You guys get to be part of that process of holding students' hands through this. And we also have to remember this, right? Whether it's community college or not, some parents are not as involved in kids' lives as we would like them to be. So there are conversations that have never been had at home. There are conversations that have never been had in the community. Or worse, there are conversations that have happened, except they were so negative, no great value came out of them. And let's swing it to the other side. Conversations were so positive that the blind spot was not seeing that there's some areas of concern. So I like to bring a balanced perspective. And so you might be that person that gets to bring that balanced perspective for your students. Here's my last thought on this idea. I have a very simple solution for you if you would like to get burned out and overwhelmed. Try to take care of every student. The moment you do that is the moment you become useless to everyone. On my community college campus, 5 or 6 people were very interested in me. 5 or 6. And I'm okay with that. I can't imagine that they were interested in hundreds of students or they connected with hundreds, because a part of it is not really interest. They're just some students you connect with. That's who you help. Because sometimes we feel as if we're burdened or we should be burdened with taking care of everyone. And unfortunately, that leads to burnout. Then we lose you. And in losing you, the students that you were meant to support and strengthen have lost you. Oh, and by the way, the rest of us higher education people, we've lost you too. And so now your voice is gone, your perspective is gone, your support is gone, your strength is gone. You can see where I'm going with that. So what you're seeing on campus is a challenge, but it's not something that we can't work through one relationship at a time. Please don't forget that. We're never going to solve the biggest issues without relationship. We can't. Interpersonal communication and interpersonal relationships are the linchpins for us solving quote unquote big problems. Because when we solve a big problem for one student or one particular person, that's multiple generations that you're impacting. And there are circles around that particular person that make a difference. Right? I think it was Denzel Washington who was talking about being involved in the Boys and Girls Club. And think about the impact the Boys and Girls Club had on him. And then look at the long list of actors, as well as people who are not actors, that he has personally, directly impacted. So we don't have to have this large splash, because I know we're burdened, because it is, whatever the issue is, it's a big thing, right? We want to make sure all the kids aren't anxious. We want to make sure all the kids aren't afraid. I get that, but we can't. And today I'm here for you, as obviously as an extension to our students on campus, but we are here for you. We need you to be okay first, right? Hannah and I are your co-pilots, and we're telling you that just in case there's a drop in cabin pressure, oxygen masks will fall from the top of the plane. Please put on your mask first before helping someone else.
Yeah, that's a really great point and sets us up perfectly for our next question for our breakout room. So thank you for setting that up. Great, Dr. Kozhi. How are you feeling? So that will be what you're going to share when we send you to those breakout rooms. We will be able to have them fewer numbers in the breakout rooms, so they'll be a little bit more intimate than last time. And Dan, go ahead and take it away and send the participants to those rooms. All right, everyone, welcome back from your groups. I hope you had some great discussion. We'll have a little bit of time here to debrief with all of you. So same as before, feel free to pop those into the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and share what you're feeling.
So here's what we like to do, whatever session I'm having, is I like to do a one-word check-in. And so in the chat section, why don't you just throw out there your one-word check-in? It might be tired, anxious, nervous, frightened, whatever that word might be, just throw it out there and I will read them and I will show you how we're all feeling. Angry, blessed, angry, happy, uneasy, overwhelmed, strange, exhausted, supported, confused, validated, scared, agitated, weird, hopeless, uncertain, tired, strangely calm. And we're going with, that's hyphenated, strangely calm, one word, hyphenated, drained, unheard, mixed, happy and stressed together. It is what it is. That's another one that's hyphenated. And if you can just get that sense, I have zero issues with you feeling what you're feeling. So please, let's make sure you have zero feelings with what you're feeling. You have no one to apologize to for feeling what you're feeling. And the worst thing that can ever happen is when a person tries to tell you how to feel. Now, we're all old enough that unfortunately we've had an argument with a significant other at one point or another where they try to tell us how we should be feeling, right? You say, I'm angry, and they say, well, you shouldn't be angry. You're like, excuse me? Then you get angry, right? So it's absolutely okay for you to feel that. Please feel. The best leaders feel. The best leaders feel. You have to be able to feel. Creating that space where you can ask those types of questions does a wonderful number on your students. One, it lets them know that you are genuinely interested in listening to them, not hearing them, right? You don't want to be heard. You want to be listened to. Hearing is just the process of decoding sounds. I don't want someone to just decode the sounds that are coming out of my mouth. I want them to listen, to take what I have to say to heart, for it to be meaningful to them. And by doing that, it validates me. It lets me know that I am part of their life for that moment. We all need that. So when we're trying to figure out our solutions, Kim says feeling helps me work through a solution. Absolutely. Because some of us, when we feel, now we can speak. And because we can speak, we can process. And in processing, we're not just throwing things against the wall. When we hear it come out of our mouths and we're like, I think I already know what I need to do with this. Or, man, I think I know where I need to think a little bit deeper. Very, very important. And there are moments where there's nothing you can actually do beyond feeling. That's all you can do. Right now, I'm just feeling. I don't have a solution. I don't have to have a solution, but I'm going to feel. The only thing I ask every single one of us is, in the process of doing that, in the process of having those feelings, they never become an excuse for doing the whole right versus wrong. They never become an excuse for any behavior that is detrimental to us or to others. That should never be licensed. People tell me, well, I was angry, that's why I did such and such. I said, well, your anger is separate from what you did. You were angry, period. Then you went and did this, period. We all have to be accountable for what we feel. So I revel in my feelings of joy, but I also revel in my feelings of melancholy, my feelings of sadness, my feelings of meh, my feelings of whatever I have for that day. I revel in them because that's the joy of being human. And it's time to bring back being human to leading. It's time to bring back being human to the community, because when we lose that, we lose it all.
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Kozhi. And since we're running a little bit short here on time, instead of sending you to a breakout room, I have a question that I would like to ask you, focusing on this, how can we support our students? So what tips and advice do you have for higher ed staff supporting students on both sides of that political spectrum when the campus might lean one way or the other? And with this question, this came from someone who is registered today and is attending, but they shared with us that their campus tends to lean more liberal. And this becomes difficult because those conservative students might not feel like they're heard or supported and often have that target on them. So while the liberal groups are feeling their voice is correct and supported because that's the way their campus leans. In a lot of cases, we've got campuses that lean more towards conservatives. So we've got folks out there working at institutions on both sides. So what advice do you have for professionals of how they can support their students?
I think one of the things that we need to do is we need to learn how to accept nuance and ambiguity. I can't let my personal view taint what needs to be done right, if that makes sense. So let's just throw examples out there. I'm conservative. My campus is, let's say I'm conservative. My campus is conservative, but we have someone that's liberal. Well, if my values truly dictate that every voice should be amplified, whether I agree with it or not, the righteous thing to do is to provide support that is completely equal to both types of students. But in order for that to happen, I have to get to the point where I recognize that there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of ambiguity. And I don't have to know everything. Because when my students see that with me, they can appreciate it, and I provide an example for how they should behave as well. Now, taking that level of position, it's going to cost you social capital. It's going to cost you a lot. But those are the moments when our social capital matters most. It's in those moments where there's a deep need in the community, and the community isn't monolithic. It's not just one type of student. We have to serve all students. And part of serving all students is giving all students a voice, regardless of whether we agree with them or we don't. And that can be really hard, because sometimes another person might do something that truly grates on our values. But as a leader on my campus, that's not my position to play. Neither is it the student's position to play. Their position is to share, this is my thought. I will hear what your thought is. I don't have to agree with it, but I will hear it. And the same benefits I have, I think you should have. Now, we can go into the weeds and talk about, language and impact and all those different things. But I think at the core, that's what's most important is, as the leader and as a person supporting my students, I need to teach myself and teach my students that there's going to be a lot of ambiguity, and nuance is the norm. And it's important for them to learn, because once they leave our campus, we all know the world is cruel. It is absolutely cruel. And if it would be the most cruel thing for us to do is to create an environment that makes it seem as if when they leave our campus, the world will bend to their will, whichever side of politics they fall on. The world doesn't bend to anyone's will, not that way, right? We have to make it do that. And to do that, you work that through coalitions, you work that through relationships and nurturing collaboration. That's how that works. But if we don't model that for the students, it makes it difficult. So to me, that's the number one thing. And I'll probably say the second thing is vulnerability. Vulnerability is the payment that every single one of us makes for the relationships in our lives. Think about your closest relationships. You are most vulnerable to those folks. So we need to be vulnerable enough that we can tell the students, if it's appropriate, I don't agree with that position, but it's not about me. And so you may not agree with the position either, but it's not about you. It's about doing what's right. And what's right is the same way I gave you the space and the respect to share your position, I must give the next person the same, because that's the righteous thing to do. Now, it's not going to be popular. Righteous things aren't popular. Doing the right thing has never been popular. But we're not in a popularity contest. We are going to do what's right and what's best. And again, some of our students may not have heard that from their parents or their peers or from their community. You get to be the first person that puts that out there for you. So please make sure that you do that as well.
Great. Well, we are approaching that 5 o'clock hour for those folks in Eastern time, and we're going to close here today. So thank you so much, Dr. Kozhi, for facilitating and being a part of this. It's been a great opportunity to work with you on this and have this important dialogue with folks today. And I want to thank all of the participants for your active participation. This session wouldn't have been possible if you weren't willing to open up a little bit and share with a group of strangers. So thank you. And as we are anxiously awaiting the results of the election, I would just like to leave you with a quote by Theodore Roosevelt. "This country will not be a good place for any of us to live unless we make it a good place for all of us to live in." Thank you all for attending, and have a great afternoon.